Sholem Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Shalom Aleichem. This is Release Day Part 4. If you are just tuning into this, I strongly suggest that you go back and watch Parts 1, 2, and 3. And now we return to Abraham Weisfeld, PhD, live streaming on Facebook. This live streaming was done on April the 8th of 2019.
He's ordered me to take the live feed away. He sort of began to approach me, so I'm leaving there. I'm going to pull back here. Okay, he's ordering. He ordered me away, and he was ordering everybody to withdraw, to pull back. He doesn't want people to be so close to the prison. These are two Ethiopian Jewish soldiers. Now he's insisting, and he's. But they are withdrawing. They're not using violence. These are Ethiopian prison police who just ordered us back. So there, nearly got arrested again. But the two prison guards are withdrawing now. There they go, far away. Okay. So that's what it's like here. You know, a population under occupation that is obliged to submit to orders at any time by anybody. Okay. Now, in the Israel election coming up, the story is this. So Netanyahu has proposed the annexation of the settlements and the outposts of the settlements. And supposedly this is to gain more votes. But it may backfire on him because if he pulls votes away from some of the more right-wing parties, they will not be able to get representation in the Knesset parliament because they will not pass the 5% vote minimum in order to get seats in the Knesset, which would be an interesting and good phenomenon. But the votes may not necessarily go to his party, the Likud, because he is being accused of corruption, 3 counts of corruption by the Attorney General. And so this has demoralized the supporters, and they don't want to make the effort to go out and vote for somebody who's, you know, like a jerk, who's just trying to enrich himself and become a member of the national bourgeoisie by way of a political path. Now, the accusations, you know, leveled against him of corruption are this. At one point, in order to get elected in the last election, he made a deal with one newspaper publisher to get more favorable coverage by withdrawing certain privileges for a second competing Israel newspaper that was financed by Adelson, an American billionaire who finances the settlements, who financed this newspaper that was supporting Netanyahu, and yet Netanyahu stopped that newspaper from being, I think it was distributed for free on weekends or on Sabbath or something like that. Anyway, in order for that withdrawal of privilege, the other paper, which is called another very old man coming back from work. The other newspaper gave Netanyahu more favorable coverage, while, you know, Adelson's newspaper was also giving him favorable coverage. So he was getting it, you know, from both sides. Except that this became known. There was even recording of telephone conversation to that effect. And this is considered to be political corruption. Then there's, you know, the monetary corruption, in which he collected some money, kickbacks, for giving a contract to some company or other, military contractor, which bought some submarines, U-boats from Germany. Yes, Germany, which supplied Israel with submarines to be used as against the Palestinians. No, not against Palestinians, but to function as what the State of Israel has been set up to be, as the guard dog of the Middle East on behalf of the Western Christian Occidental countries, so as to protect access to the Suez Canal, to perhaps get into the Persian Gulf, to threaten Iran with submarines that may very well have nuclear-capable missiles on it. And yes, of course, Israel has nuclear bombs, you know, about 200 or so supposedly. And so on it goes. And then the third accusation of corruption against Netanyahu was, I forget. There's just too much. Okay, now the opposition to Netanyahu has been gaining traction. One is this former general who boasts about how many people he killed in Gaza. I think the number is 1,355 or something, that he put into a publicity and actually rolled the numbers before everybody to impress everyone. This general, who is called by the right wing a secret liberal or leftist, Gantz is his name. And he's formed an alliance with Lapid, which is a former television personality who formed a centrist party which was calling for secularism, and he wanted to force the recruitment of the Jewish Orthodox youth into the military. Now, the bill to do so was actually the instance which broke up the coalition that Netanyahu had formed previously, because the Orthodox religious party called Shas of Mizrahim, Jewish Arabs, who were supporting the Likud coalition, withdrew their support because they couldn't support, you know, this bill, which would have recruited their children and their daughters, especially, you know, into the military, which they could not tolerate. So that's why his coalition fell apart before. Now, if he continues with that policy, then he will not be able to form a new coalition, because his support for the Likud has declined. It's expected he will only have 26 seats instead of 30, and that the Gantz-Lapid coalition will have 30 or 35 seats. But they don't have any outstanding partners unless Shas chooses to join in with them. But Lapid, you know, has forbidden that, because he's, vowed, you know, to oppose the Orthodox and wants to recruit them into the military, which the Orthodox will not agree to. So either Lapid has to give up that provision, which is, you know, his main election plank, basically, what he calls, you know, sharing the burden of military service, because, you know, Israelis are finally getting tired of doing military service. So there seems to be a blockage there. And then, you know, Gantz as well, you know, like wouldn't be able to form much of a coalition, because he opposes forming a coalition with the Palestinian parties, which would be gaining some seats there. So how they're going to form a majority if they, cannot, you know, form a coalition with either the Shas religious party or the Palestinian political parties, who knows? Anyway, perhaps they can just function from bill to bill, and, you know, rely upon, you know, the majority of votes, you know, on a circumstantial basis. But that's how it lines up to be. Now, the news is we're still waiting for Gadir to be released from the prison. And they seem to be delaying it, you know, because we have so many people here waiting for her. And they seem to be aware of that, because they just sent out the 2 guards there to tell us to get lost. And of course, you know, on such a mission, they send out, you know, 2 Ethiopian Jewish guards to make it look good, like they're not being racist, that type of, you know, look good. The racism in Israel of Zionism is not the standard racism that you would find in the United States, you know, based upon skin color or, you know, origin, but rather based upon national chauvinism. National chauvinism is, of course, you know, racism, but a different form of racism. And here, the national chauvinism practiced by Zionism claims to be, a national chauvinism based upon, a Jewish nation. However, this is not true. Zionism is an ideology based upon Christian Protestant restorationist theology, and was not an original Jewish proposition. The Jewish people, since the Babylonian exile and the Talmudic
So, some good news. Donna Newman is recovering from being gravely ill. Yes, that is some good news. I hope everyone liked the interview I did with Steve Struggle, who was a member of the original Black Panther Party. At this point, it's just simply best for Dr. Abram Weisfeld to speak for himself.
We're looking to see if Gadir is walking out of the prison. There is a woman walking out down the highway there who's petite like Gadir, but doesn't seem to be there, Gadir, no. More Palestinian workers coming back. No, that woman is going away in a car. She's been picked up. It's not Gadir. Okay, so the election tomorrow determines the future of Palestine for the coming period. Now, even though, Netanyahu has made an election promise to annex, the settlements and outposts of Sector C. Hello, Nasser. This is Nasser, another prisoner that I was liberated with. We were in prison together all day, all night. So, this promise, electoral promise of Netanyahu, is not immediately implementable. Even the announced annexation of the Golan Heights was negotiated with the United States and planned for over a 2-year period, because these things are against international law, and there's many who would oppose, especially with the annexation of such a large sector of Palestine, 60% of the West Bank. This would enrage the Arab League, would be obliged to do something, otherwise they would suffer the consequences, namely social revolution in their own countries, which would get rid of those, monarchies who are actually in alliance, with Zionist Israel. So, in order to avoid the destabilization of the entire Middle East, they wouldn't be able to implement such an annexation policy immediately. Everything would depend upon the following year, in which the United States of America is holding an election as well. And there Trump is running against and trying to get reelected. Of course, if Trump is reelected, then they could proceed with the annexation of Sector C of the West Bank here. But if Trump is not elected and Bernie Sanders is elected, the President of the United States of America, then Bernie Sanders has said that he opposes the occupation, and this will not go through. And then, the recognition of Palestine will follow through, especially when Jeremy Corbyn is elected Prime Minister of England, and on behalf of the Labour Party, and during which he has already promised that the first thing he would do when elected Prime Minister is to recognize the independent state of Palestine. So this whole Zionist trip would begin to be reversed. In fact, it has already begun to be reversed, because Israel was forced to retreat from the Sinai Peninsula and the Suez Canal, which it was right up to, in a treaty with Egypt that it was desperate to achieve with Sadat, who was later assassinated. And for having made such a treaty, but Israel withdrew from the Sinai nonetheless, and even removed a couple of settlements that were planted there in the Sinai desert, called the Yarmit, I think it was. The second retreat of the Zionist State of Israel was in Gaza, when they had some 500 settlers there, and they had to have 5,000 troops planted there in order to protect them. And that became unfeasible, and the General Sharon withdrew them in order to consolidate the security and the power of the Zionist state. Of course, those settlers were merely removed from the Gaza and planted into the West Bank. But nonetheless, Israel was forced to withdraw from the Gaza Strip. And since then, they've put it under siege, especially after 2006, when the more radical Hamas party actually won the Palestinian election, which was the first democratic election in the Arab world, and which was unrecognized by the rest of the world, except for Iran and Turkey and a few countries like that. Okay. So that was the second withdrawal of the Zionist state of Israel from territory, Gaza. And the third withdrawal, partial withdrawal, minimalist withdrawal, was the Oslo Agreement in 1993, when Israel actually signed an agreement, a peace treaty, with the Palestinian PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization, to form a autonomous government called the Palestinian Authority in the territory here, centered in Sector A, which is basically the cities and some villages, in the villages of Palestine, comprising 2.5 million Palestinians. So the Palestinian Authority was set up, and they set up, like governmental headquarters. They had a national police, all that sort of apparatus. Until the second Intifada, the reason why the Oslo Agreement was signed by Israel is because, in the first Intifada of 1987, the Palestinians were fighting so fiercely against the military occupation that the military was actually suffering, and they couldn't sustain such a prolonged internal guerrilla war. So they agreed, the Palestinians, PLO, Arafat agreed to stop the resistance movement against the military occupation in exchange for the recognition of a partial autonomy in Sector A, with provision for the recognition of the Palestine state over a 5-year period of negotiations, except that Israel never followed through. So the Palestinian Authority remained, and so because there was no follow-through, there was a second Intifada that broke out when the General Sharon was elected Prime Minister of Israel, even though he was forbidden to hold higher office, after he was considered personally responsible for the massacre of Sabra Shatila in 1982 in Lebanon, in the Palestinian refugee camp, when 3,000 Palestinians were killed by the fascist allies of Israel, the Phalangists, over a 3-day period. Now, that was the third withdrawal of Israel from Lebanon, when they were first a partial withdrawal up to the Litani River from Beirut after that massacre, and then a complete withdrawal from Litani River to the previous border with Lebanon. Okay. Then in 1993, that was in 1985, and then there was the subsequent withdrawal under UN pressure. Then Israel did not withdraw for the Golan Heights, in Syria. That they still occupy, and now they claim to be annexed. But the Oslo Agreement in 1993 was later smashed by General Sharon when he came in to Nablus and Ramallah and bombed and shelled, with tank shells, the Muqata, the Palestinian political headquarters, and destroyed, pulverized, the governmental offices there. That's when Arafat was put under siege, until finally he died under mysterious circumstances and probably assassinated by one way or another. Something to do with, the water that he was forced to drink, probably. So Oslo was smashed, but it was reborn, and now the Qatar's are rebuilt, and now there's a Palestinian Authority which is even going to the International Criminal Court against Israel. So Israel retreated and allowed this to happen, and they could not reoccupy Sector A as General Sharon did in 2001. What set off the second Intifada in 2001 was when General Sharon, in a victory sort of, march of his, went into the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound plateau there with 1,000 soldiers, to protect him, one guy. And this was such an outrage, that the Palestinians revolted, a military revolt, and fought against, the military occupation, which is the right of any, occupied people to do, according to international law. So they then retreated, finally, and the Palestinian Authority was reestablished and began to acquire certain powers and international stature and international recognition, recognized as the Palestinian state by so many countries throughout the world. So that's where we are at. The Zionist strategy to advance, and the Palestinian strategy to counter-advance. Now we're still waiting for Gadir to come out of the prison. No word. Yes, I should ask, if the guards had anything to say about the release of Gadir. Did the guards say anything about when Gadir is going to come out? No, they say nothing. They just tell us to go away. Yeah. Okay. No news yet for the release of Gadir. Here's her husband still waiting for her to return. Okay, resuming the broadcast. I must have touched something. I don't know how long a broadcast, Facebook will take. This is the longest live broadcast I've ever made. I want to be sure that it's going to be saved. So I'm going to save this portion and then I will come back.
Alright, well, that was it. That was Dr. Abram Weisfeld giving a very good and well-rounded detailed history of the problems of Zionism, as well as details about the final release of a Palestinian comrade. Our heart goes out, and our prayer, and all of us who do pray, for those of us who believe in God and pray, we pray for Dr. Abram Weisfeld to remain intact. Now, as a Sephardi, aka a Jewish Al-Andalusian, I say to everyone, Palestina, libre, libre, ma'asalama, shalom, adio, al-Quds, mi amor.